We are now on to aspect 5 of Desjardins' second chapter of Introduction to Business Ethics. Here we are going to discuss the third theory of morals, and that is morals or ethics of character. So let's quickly look at the themes to come. Happiness, once again, is going to be the key theme here, the key human fundamental purpose that this theory of ethics is aiming to maximize, like in utilitarianism, but happiness means something other than what happiness means in utilitarianism. So, happiness, once again, discussion of what character is, and then the basic thought of virtue ethics, ethics of character, is the distinction between virtues and vices. And finally, as is usual, we'll have criticism of virtue ethics from Kantian and utilitarian camps. So, ethics of character concerns itself with happiness, like utilitarianism, but happiness is here conceived differently. Happiness is a basic human value, thus fulfilling the first requirement of morals from chapter 1. And just one more time, happiness is a basic human value that is the goal of all our actions. And it is also that by which we measure the goodness of a person's character. A good character is one that is a happy character. When we ask whether a person is of good character, whether we ask whether it is a character that leads to a happy, meaningful, and fulfilling life for that person. Right? So just thinking about what it means to speak of the good character. By character, here is meant a person's disposition or habit to act in a certain way as a result of past actions. Like one can be in the habit of telling the truth, or one can be in the habit of lying. Telling the truth would be a virtue, lying would be a vice. One more time. By character here is meant a person's disposition or habit to act in a certain way formed as a result of past actions. For example, a person acts with courage as a result of having acted with courage many times in the past, as a result of which a person has become the kind of a person that acts with courage. Likewise, a person acts with cowardliness as a result of having acted with cowardliness many times in the past, as a result of which the person has become the kind of a person that acts with cowardliness. Insofar as a fulfilling and meaningful life requires courage, courage is a virtue of character, while its opposite, cowardliness, is a vice of character. In what sense is courage a virtue of character? Well, to have courage is just the ability to take on challenging tasks and set challenging goals. In spite of all the easy distractions that one may succumb to, or in spite of fear that one may have to give oneself challenging tasks and setting challenging goals for oneself. So a person of good character will obviously be a person of courage, a person who does not shy away from doing those things that they should do. That would be the happy person, right? That's the thought of ethics of character as virtue ethics. So one basic school of morals that takes the above seriously and claims that virtuous character is all that matters for human beings is virtue ethics. The good of everything else is measured by whether it comes from a virtuous character and forms a virtuous character. Thus, a morally good action is one that comes from virtue and creates in a person's character virtue. In other words, by acting courageously, one becomes courageous. By acting honestly, one becomes honest in one's character. The above, the virtue ethics, is properly moral or is impartial and objective in the sense that virtue should be created not only in oneself, but also in others. Although the emphasis on the self is primary, but the thought here is that by acting with virtue, one can also create virtue in others. This will become a bit clearer once we look at what specific virtues are. Meanwhile, the school of thought that subscribes to the above, the virtue of character, ethics of character, is virtue ethics, most powerfully articulated by Aristotle in ancient Greece in the 4th century BCE. It is called virtue ethics, since the moral worth of an action is measured in terms of whether it comes from virtuous character and produces virtuous character. Right? So acting with virtue produces virtuous character, and that is the happy person, is the thought here. And acting without virtue produces a character full of vices, and that would be the unhappy person. Again, this will become just a bit clearer once we look at the specific virtues that are in mind here. The best thing to do is to list the basic virtues and vices and to think about how a good life is not possible without those virtues and is destroyed by their opposites or vices. So here are the examples of virtue: honesty, trustworthiness, loyalty, courteousness, moderation, respectfulness, compassion. And the vices are greedy, envious, gloomy, arrogant, selfish. Those are the persons whose character is full of vices, right? So if you think about these character traits, it's not difficult to see that a person who has these virtues lives a happy life, and the person who has these vices lives a life that's not happy and not meaningful. A lot resides here, and that we are social beings. And by means of virtues, we would get along with others well and thus live good lives. While by means of vices, we would get along with others horribly and thus live horrible lives. Right? So we can completely see how, with these virtues, one gets along with others well and is thus a happy person. On the other hand, if one has these vices, one does not get along with others well and does not live a happy and meaningful life. A lonely life is not a good life, right? It's the folks with virtues that you want to have as friends, and it's the folks with vices that you want to stay away from, right? We can also put it this way: just ask yourself about how you would want your children to be as you would raise them. Would you want them to be full of the above virtues, or would you want them to be full of these vices? I'm going to bet you want your children to have virtues. Businesses likewise would prefer to have employees with virtues. Think about the virtues and vices in the previous paragraph. Clearly, businesses would like to have employees with virtues who are courageous, compassionate, honest. Such employees would not take advantage of the business or the clients and are reliable employees. A business does not want employees who take advantage of clients. Such a business would not survive very long. Clients would simply go to other businesses. Of course, in order for a business to have employees with virtue, business must not subject employees to practices as a result of which they would develop vices. Remember, one becomes virtuous in one's character if one acts with virtue, and one becomes full of vice if one acts with vices. Do businesses encourage actions of virtue, or do business encourage actions of vice? The example that Desjardins gives here is that of advertisement employees who are asked to develop ads that aim to sell unhealthy food to children. The thought is that those employees would not be the ones who would cultivate virtues of honesty, trustworthiness, loyalty, courteousness, moderation, respectfulness, and compassion. It would make those employees greedy, envious, gloomy, arrogant, and selfish. How else would you be able to attempt to sell food that is not good for children to children, right? Criticism of virtue ethics. There would be a utilitarian criticism. For example, perhaps greed in person produces more happiness than suffering in persons overall. That would be the utilitarian criticism, right? Maybe having greedy persons would produce more happiness for everyone. Like if the employees were competitive in the market and innovative and create goods that make so many consumers happy, right? Wouldn't they need a vice like greed for that sort of a thing? Virtue ethics thinker would reply that that kind of happiness is superficial and cannot make happy a person with a corrupt character. So maybe this greedy character would take home lots of cash, but they wouldn't have meaningful relations with others, right? Who wants a greedy person as a friend? And how deep do you want your relationship to be with greedy persons? So yeah, there will be the utilitarian criticism. Don't we want greedy persons to really advance products in society and compete by any means possible and be that kind of ruthless and greedy persons? Virtue ethics disagrees. Their thought is that the character of such people would be ruined. And so perhaps they would produce good products, but they would develop the kinds of characters that would make it very difficult for them to form meaningful relations with others. And there would also be a Kantian criticism of virtue ethics, and the Kantian criticism would look like this. Rationality demands that we, above all, respect the freedom of persons as an end in itself, rather than aim for happiness. Right? For a Kantian thinker, the question is, do you have the right intentions? Do you have the intentions of respect for persons' freedom as an end in itself? That's the kind of moral thinking we should be doing, according to Kantians. Virtue ethics thinker would reply that freedom and dignity are abstractions, and that the only thing that matters is having a good character that leads to a fulfilling life.